That was the game changer in my life. Well, I was no longer just doing what I was doing just to make sure dad and mom got the kudos. But when all of a sudden I realized that this unique gifting, the ability to play football, that I had no clue I can do. I thought everybody else was better. When you don't get recruited, in the vision in our family was to go to school and get education. Sports was never our ticket out the community. We were living in a part of Holly Grove, which is the 17th ward, that's called middle class. But 5 blocks away, everything changes. So literally, exposure, we were 4 or 5 blocks away from a totally different world. Do you know how many people in those underserved areas have been taught not to go in the served areas? Do you know that they think there is an invisible barrier? Yeah. I wanted to know, how do you inspire people who have no hope? Now, the dangerous thing when you and I are doing well, my parents' middle-class home. Achilles, my middle brother, my oldest brother, Malcolm, is a master plumber. But what happened to those who are still in those communities? What happened to those who don't believe it's possible? What happened to those who we unintentionally believe just keep them over in that area? Yeah. We don't say it. Yeah. Our actions show it. Yeah. Here's what we're finding out, particularly in Ferguson and places like that. Great people. You cannot quarantine something and keep it in a space in a country and neglect them, because we're better together. Yeah. And until the least of us are doing well, I'm going to say it again. Yeah. Until the least are doing well, none of us are. Why is that important? The Ferguson situation, there are a whole lot of root causes of problems, but one of the things when I ask God, I say, Lord, if you are real, show me how you relate to us in everyday life. And that's when the Lord began to teach me the nature of purpose. If I can find the purpose of a human being, and every human being has a purpose. The other thing, not only the nature of purpose, but the nature of and the power of an example. In Ferguson, you had civic leaders and many other municipalities throughout St. Louis. You had civic leaders who had a vision for a certain standard of living in their community, which is noble and great. Only one problem. When you're making these decisions about the whole community, you have to have representatives at the table from every aspect of the community. Why is that important? It's not because the people who had these ideals are bad people. It's just when you don't have diversity at the table. Number one, you don't get the biggest creative opportunity. That's number one. Number two, you don't get input from those who are not at the table. And for Christ followers, one thing we learn is to leverage your influence while at the table on behalf of those who are not at the table. That's called the reconciliation model. It was never supposed to be just religion. So let me close with my story. The Southern University. Growing up in New Orleans, and at this time, and this is no knock, it is what it is. The schools I attended, they were decent schools. But if they were evaluated as it relates to a standard of accreditation, maybe they did accredit it, I don't know. But I do know there was a huge deficit and deficiency in the schools I attended. Give you a question. Anyone in here growing up, you were taught sight words? Sight words, those like 100 words that you just learn and memorize. Can I get a witness? Anybody here, right? I had never heard of sight words. until I was helping my children do homework like 4 years ago. That's criminal. So can you imagine you fortunate, you're able to go to a accredited great school, private or public, and you, not because of intended consequences, you begin to think that you're better. Yeah. It's not that you're better. It's not that they're worse. You have to thank God for the opportunity that you were exposed to. Now, why is that important? Because until you walk in someone's shoes, this organization called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes, I have so much respect for you ladies. When I see you guys in high heels, I want to bow down to you. So I was invited to be the chairperson in St. Louis for this organization called Walk a Mile in Her Shoes. I've seen my mother, my mother-in-law, ladies in high heel shoes. And this organization is geared toward bringing awareness toward domestic violence, particularly toward women. So I accepted the invitation. It's great. I got 3 girls. I got a mother, a mother-in-law, and that's a great organization. But I still didn't really get it. Like some things as an influencer, you accept because it's a great cause, put your name to it, get more exposure to it, to that organization. But I still didn't get it. And I said, okay, what do I need to do? They said, we want to use your name and likeness and your picture. And then at the end of the 3-week campaign, we want the chairperson to come down. We do a 1-mile walk downtown St. Louis. We want you to come and do the 1-mile walk, except we need you to do it in high heel shoes. I said, hold up. All right, that's a non-negotiable. I don't think I'll be able to do it. And so they said, okay, they said, no problem. If you don't want to, you could just put a flower on each shoe, your tennis shoe, and you can walk it in your tennis shoes with the flower on. Oh, great, okay, I'm in. So we go through the campaign, everything is good. And the point of this, I'm still talking about until you walk a mile in somebody's shoes. So we get there, and I was to go on stage. I get there are thousands of people out there, and men all around. And all the men had on these red high heel shoes. So I get there, and they say, okay, we need you, the county executive, and 2 other people. I need the 4 of you all go on stage. You'll do about a 2 to 3 minute just rally speech, get everybody going, and then the nearest you'll lead the walk. So I see all these guys with high heel shoes on. I said, okay, I gotta at least look like a man. And so I was prepared to have my flowers on each shoe. So I said to them, hoping that surely they don't have any more shoes left, right? But I want to connect with the organization. I said, okay, could you give me, I wear a size 13, and I can put them on while I do the rally. The 2-minute cheering. All of a sudden, to my chagrin, here she comes, size 13. And so I asked the guys, and how many of y'all know some of them have been drinking just a little bit? So I said, y'all gonna walk, are you guys gonna walk with the high heels on? And they said, oh yeah, we're gonna walk. And I mean, they're stumbling and everything. I still don't get the thrust of this organization. So I get on the stage. I'm the 4th person to talk. Each person's getting up and they're doing maybe about 1 minute. After the 2nd person, I'm standing there with those high heel shoes on. And I'm in great shape. My calves hurting. My back hurting. I'm like, what? The pain a woman will go through to look good, all of a sudden, I started to feel you ladies. So all of a sudden, I could see the picture of my mother, my wife, my daughters going to a function and walking to the car with their shoes in their hands. What's my point in all of this? It was at that moment I connected to that organization. It was at that moment a being in the person's shoes. I had never experienced domestic violence, never saw it in my home. But once I connected it, it went more from sympathy to empathy. Empathy is when you've experienced it, or at least taken the time to hear someone else's story. Because when you've now walked in those shoes, you know how men we are. Oh, come on, walk in those shoes. You got it. We try to do everything bravo. Oh, I'll walk in those shoes till you put them on. And then you realize it takes more than grit. I just left Washington, D.C., and the President's Initiative First Step. Some of you all may not be familiar with it. I got a chance to interview 2 ladies that had just been released from prison as a result of that legislation. And some places I go, and I don't really know why the Lord sends me. I am just to go and listen. And they had all these breakouts. It was about prison reform. My uncle, my dad's brother, who he's most like in terms of intelligence and leadership, my Uncle Leroy, was sentenced to Angola for life, distribution of heroin, nonviolent crime. As I sat down and listened to the ladies, one had been in jail, Catherine, who had misspelled her name her whole life because she didn't know her first name started with C instead of K. So as I listened to her, she had just gotten out of prison. She had heard, all the prisoners had heard about the law being passed, but they thought just like legislation, it would take time before it got to law. After that legislation was passed, she was out in 2 weeks. She said all of a sudden she got a call from someone in the prison and said, "You're released." Now that's great news to be free, except when your freedom, you go home, you have no clothes. Your medicine that you were getting at the prison, you can no longer get. The transportation, even get a job. The halfway house that you go to for the reentry, mandatory, charge you 20% of the minimum wage salary you're making. And you hear her crying because her daughter and her granddaughter she's living with. And our responsibility was to listen, to see what are the things we needed to learn from their experience that we can now help implement. Is more than just freedom. It's one of the things the corporation, Keith, shared with me. They help train people. Because you can be free but not know how to live. You're just a free person in bondage. But when the experts that are in the room, when you take the time to not only build and revitalize communities, you partner with this organization and you make sure that there are some apprentices that learn the trade, that we're not just pillaging to gouging. It's great to make a profit. If you're in business and you don't make a profit, you now in a non-profit. So it is godly to be profitable. It is ungodly to be irresponsibly profitable. Yeah. So as I close with this one, the only difference between people is what they believe. I followed Achilles, and Achilles and I were going to school year-round at the Southern University. Let me tell you about this historical black college. They had this division called Junior Division. For those that don't know about Junior Division, it is the division for freshmen particularly to get you caught up because of the deficits that you experience in the education prior to secondary education. It's the remedial courses that I took to get me up to speed, to help me make sure I knew how to learn, to make sure, even though I had great role models, but when it comes down to education, my dad said education, my mom said education is a game changer. And I used to chide my dad, because we'd see on TV, you see the young boys getting in trouble, you see people killing each other. And I used to always chide him. And he said, we got to get these kids education. We got to get it. We got to help them. I say, Dad, the environment these young people in, these underserved areas, they're not like that because of undereducated people. They're like that because those that are in leadership and responsible for helping create an environment for them have been irresponsible with the education they've received. That's not a knock. What it means is, whoever you're serving as an elected official, whoever it is, our responsibility, and God will hold you accountable, hold me accountable, when you check out of here, as to how did you deal with the least fortunate? What did you practically do besides a photo op to make sure that there's some measurables? One thing about football, it's measurable. It's measurables. And I know in this room we can change things. You know why? I saw the state of Louisiana and city of New Orleans. I saw y'all change something. This unique thing called anger, that's a God-given thing. It just has to be channeled right. I saw the state of Louisiana. I saw the city of New Orleans. I saw what happened within the last month when a group of people get angry about something. I was walking on the river, Saints gear everywhere. So I'm at the Super Bowl in Atlanta. We got billboards. I got friends in New Orleans won't even talk to me about the Super Bowl. So the whole state and the city boycotted the Super Bowl just about. Don't tell me if we don't get indignant and mad about something, we can't change it. So what do you mean? This happened in January. Don't tell me Sean Payton, Coach Payton, was not at the owners' meeting representing the state of Louisiana and New Orleans on that call in that game. He was so fired up. Y'all were so fired up. Economically, you had an impact. Don't tell me you can't do it. But here's what happens. Walk a mile in their shoes. Here's how it goes. When it don't impact you, you're not all angry about it. A few years ago, Dallas Cowboys had a chance to beat the Green Bay Packers. Cowboy fans in here. Dez Bryant caught a ball, looked like he had secured the catch, and came down, and he hit the ground, the ball goes out, they call incomplete. All the Cowboy fans, boo, boo. And you know how you Saints fans, and you know how we feel about Cowboy fans, right? Y'all know what y'all were saying. Get over it. Get over it. Until that call in the dome in January. All of a sudden, you felt the pain the Cowboy fans were experiencing. That's what happens when God gives you the unique opportunity to experience what other people are experiencing. Now I'm out of here because y'all got to eat. So my brother and I going to school year-round at Southern, including the summer. It's like we in a rush. My folks were paying for our education. I'm still on the campus. I don't know who I am. I'm Achilles' little brother. It is all good. It's always great when your role models don't disappoint you. Oh, it's cool. I'm Achilles' little brother. He pledged cap, I pledged cap. He's involved in Student Government Association. I am. I hate politics. I don't care. He's doing it, I'm doing it. I had an apartment with him. We'd be fighting in an apartment. He would fight me not to follow him. It's crazy. So he graduates with his accounting degree 3.5 years. I'm on pace to graduate in 3 years. I think he was working for Price Waterhouse at the time. He called back. He said, little brother, slow down. You'll be working the rest of your life. That's when I started trying to figure out who in the world is Aeneas. I have an accounting degree. I don't like numbers. Because my parents modeled hard work. So hard work would teach you and get you to the ladder and up the ladder. But when you get there, I hope you didn't go up the wrong ladder. So all of a sudden, I always want to know, how does God talk to people? I'd be standing next to people growing up in church. They say, God spoke to me. I ain't hear nothing. I'm standing right next to them. I kid you not. My freshman, sophomore year, I had an uncle who always said, hey, Nikki, why don't you play football? My Uncle William. And then I had a former teammate who was 2 grades ahead of me, Michael Lindsay. He said, why don't you play football? I'm through with football. It's now time to go on with the vision, education. And all of a sudden, if you had come and told me my freshman, sophomore year, you have the ability to be a pro football Hall of Famer, I would have thought you were crazy. All of a sudden, a week before the season starts, my junior year in college, you guys remember, during the summer, when all of a sudden the temperature change, the weather drops, you start smelling the fall weather. What do we say? It's football season. That nostalgia. All of a sudden, my heart changed to want to go walk on a team a week before the season started. None of my boys knew I was walking on. I didn't even tell my parents. None of them would understand. And the reason I didn't tell my parents, it wasn't catastrophic. It wasn't like I was going to drop out of school. I was still on pace. I didn't tell them because for whatever reason, I didn't want anybody to talk me out of whatever I was doing. They had been going through 3-a-days. And the coach, Coach Percy Dewey, my defense coordinator, allowed me to walk on. Now, my teammates hated me. You would too, if you've been through 3-a-days and this hot shot is now running around here all fresh. So my teammates couldn't stand me. The coaches gave me the worst equipment that you can get. I think they thought I was trying to impress a girl, but I wasn't. I was pursuing just what was in my heart, even though it was ridiculous. So all of a sudden, I call it just so happened, these God setups. God has set up your life. He just don't make you give him credit. You have to voluntarily give it to him. Yeah. So it just so happened the position I was going out for, the coach was trying to get rid of the player. So I end up starting by the 5th game of the season. I play that season, get 2 interceptions. The next season, I make all conference. And Coach Percy Dewey, lovingly, in his own opinion, and he was right. After we had upset Grambling, sorry any Gramblingites in here. We got a few. We'll deal with y'all later. So all of a sudden, the Coach Dewey, after we had upset Grambling, on the front cover of the New Orleans Times-Picayune, he says, Aeneas Williams is a good player, but at best, he'll never go pro, because at best he runs a 4.640. Now, what I got from that was not to build my life to prove Coach Dewey wrong. He was actually right, but he was given the facts. I found God gives me the truth. But I have to deal with the facts. The facts were, I'm 5'10", 185 pounds, ran a 4.6. The facts are, it's highly unlikely that I would ever play in the NFL at that position at that height. So I went to a guy named Brian Thomas. This is the power of belief. This is what I close with. This is what I want you to remember. Only difference between people is what they believe. This is the only thing I want you to remember. Only thing different between people is what they believe. So all my life, I was a 4.6 guy. I did the pole vault. I did the distance. Coach would coach the sprinters, and then he'd send me to go run. Then all my life, I was taught you can't coach speed. Either you have it or you don't. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So when I read that in the paper, I didn't build my life like a lot of people do. They build their life to prove people wrong. Your job is not to prove people wrong. Your job is to live out your potential. I went to Brian Thomas, who lives here, who's one of the top sanitation workers here. Brian is 6'3", 190 pounds. He was like our Usain Bolt. He ran a 10-1, 10 flat 100 meters, and a 4.240. He was 1 year younger than me, and I went to Brian. I said, Brian, can you help me get faster? Now, why did I go to Brian? Mentors are credible, successful others who have already done well what you're trying to do. They accelerate your belief. I didn't go to the office of alignment. You noticed that. To learn about speed, I went to Brian. Brian was a receiver younger than me. This is when I found out mentors don't have to be older. They just have to know something that you want to know. God allows humility to cause me to submit to Brian. I say, Brian, I couldn't cover him. I'd line up 10 yards off of him, he'd blow by me. I say, Brian, can you help me get faster? This is when I found out the power of transference of belief. Brian looks at me like I'm looking at you, Keith. He says, Aeneas, you can run a 4.340. And I close with this. You can run a 4.340. I say, what? And he said, without blinking, he said it so convincingly, I believed him. I say, Brian, what do I do? He said, walk on the track team. I said, walk on the track team? He said, yeah, you walked on the football team. I said, what do I do? Now, so this is going into I've already graduated. This is now the spring. So I have one spring left of graduate school or additional classes, and then I'd play that final fall season, which would have been my third season. I said, what do I do? He said, walk on the football team. It's January. He said, get next to me and do everything I do. Wow. More is caught than taught. Yeah. I didn't know my teammates were laughing at me because I couldn't keep up with Brian. We would run and we'd work out. Brian, after the workout, he would walk as if he had never worked out. I'm on the floor. And my legs are telling me, Aeneas, you can keep this up, but we finish, all right? That's what my legs were saying. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? I close with this. By April, Brian Thomas and I were the fastest two on Southern's track team. I clocked a 4.2840. I was rated the #2 cornerback in the country behind Todd Light out of Notre Dame. Why did you tell me that story? Why you ending with the story? I'll tell you. I was walking on the river. This for all you leaders. I was walking on the river and they had a school out there this morning. A bunch of elementary kids. And they had 3 little boys and they had one little leader because he was telling them. And they were all behind this pole and I was walking. And it was about 10 feet away, they saw something in the water. And one of the little boys, that's why leaders are so important, because leaders help followers see the right thing. So as I'm walking, I hear this little young leader, this elementary little young man, he said, that's an alligator. And they're all afraid. See, when you've never done it, this is where you executives, this is where you who own these companies, people are fearful when you grow up and you're without hope. You're fearful. But when somebody who knows what that really is, because when I was walking by and I heard them say, that's an alligator, and they were all like, ooh. I looked, and it's your role. I said, all that is a log in the water. That's the power of what you believe, what you've experienced. And you looking back. Thank you, ladies. It's an honor to be here.